Okay, so I'm really excited for this video because this is a writing video, and today I'm going to specifically talk about how I actually edit my manuscripts. This is going to be so rambly because I have a list of topics on my phone, but I have no idea, I have no scripts, I just have topics. I want to start with what I call the book notebook, and this is actually an idea that a friend of mine had, that's Sophie, and I literally copied Sophie. So now I have these notebooks in which each notebook corresponds to a manuscript I'm working on, and these work as literally like brain dumps. There's no other word for it. These are brain dumps. So I dump every single thing I can think about into these notebooks concerning that particular manuscript. So because I write fantasy, this means lots of world building nonsense, lots of characterization and backstories, political systems and backstories of those political systems, and a lot of the times none of these see the light of day in the manuscript itself, but they do give a different kind of texture to the writing and to the story. And I like to have a tangible place to have all of that info, and I like to have that in like a physical notebook that I can touch and I can leaf through. So this is like the basis of my editing/writing process. And usually what happens is, for instance, with my agent, when I get my edits back for my manuscript, I look at the main topics that I need to work on, and I just jot them down in my book notebook, just so I have like a clear picture of how much work this will take. So this is step number one. So step number two is transferring whatever conclusions I gathered from my notebook onto my spreadsheet. I do have a spreadsheet also for each one of my manuscripts. I link that one right below. I think I've actually shared this before on Twitter. But this spreadsheet has a lot of different sheets. So the main one, the one I work with the most, is the beat map plotter, where I basically outline the beats of the story chapter by chapter. So I know exactly which beats I'm hitting and like when does it happen page-wise and word count-wise. Then I have another sheet for a list of edits where I literally just jot down like change this thing here and this goes into this chapter. And then I have a drop-down column where I say whether that's done, whether that needs to be done, or whether that's in progress, or whether that's just cancelled and I changed my mind. So second step for my editing process is just putting everything into the spreadsheet so I know this is here. And also spreadsheets can be shared with my agent. While something on paper is not easily shareable, I would have to take pictures, and that's not as easy to share and also not as user-friendly. Okay, so this part is not specifically tied to editing, but writing-wise, after I outline my manuscript using my notebook and then using my spreadsheet, what I do is open Scrivener, and Scrivener is what I use to draft, not to edit, but to draft. I open Scrivener and I go to the binder section in Scrivener and I start just looking through all of the chapters, and I name the chapters with like a one-liner for what happens in that chapter. In the editing stage, what I will do is I will go to my binder and I will add, I don't remember what it's called, but I'll add basically a big red circle next to all the chapters that will require major editing. Of course, that for me, when I'm editing a manuscript, I will go from chapter 1 to the final chapter, even if this means that I only have to edit a couple of chapters in between, because I want to make sure that the full thing makes sense. But if there's a particular chapter that will need very heavy lifting, then I will mark it with red in Scrivener. I will work through my edits in Scrivener as much as possible, and once I am done, I will export that to Microsoft Word. So once again, we're talking about main drafts here. I'm not talking about light editing with an agent. I'm talking about big developmental edits that needs to be done and really change the entire manuscript from scratch. And that's why I do this in Scrivener. But after that is done, I will export the document to Word. I'll use the manuscript format in the export options in Times New Roman font. And then in Microsoft Word, I'll just check through it, see if everything is correctly formatted. And that's like basically stage number 1 of my edits. Once that final draft, edited draft, is on my Word documents, I will go once again through my checklist on my spreadsheet, and I will make sure that I was actually able to do all of the edits that I wanted to make. Sometimes I skip a few of them because I'm really not sure how I'm going to accomplish something. So this is when I go through the list again, but in Microsoft Word, and I make sure everything is actually in there. And usually by this point, I always find problems with consistency or typos or something that didn't export correctly. So I always like to make this little pass on Word before I send it over to my agent. Okay, and after that is done, I will do something else. I will basically send that Word document to my Kindle. And this is the best part for me. I'll send the Word document to my Kindle and I will read the full thing on my Kindle like a reader would read it. Not like the writer. I will read it like a reader, just like starting from chapter number 1. Really, I'm not trying to find any typos. I'm not trying to think about what I'm reading. I'm just trying to look at my own book and read it for leisure. That's why I like to do it on my Kindle, because if I'm doing this on my computer, I will have this itch to start line editing as I read. On my Kindle, that's not possible. So I'll just have this sort of routine where in the evening, I'll curl up with a blanket and my Kindle on the couch, and I'll just read my book as if it were any other book. And when this happens, I will also find typos, consistency issues, and most of all, things that are not connecting as much as I want them to connect. And then I will use the annotation feature in my Kindle to just usually draw a little line there and be like, okay, let's change this in the next stage. Let's change this in the next stage. Another thing I do at this point is, because, in traditional publishing, we're constantly trying to reduce word count, and I'm definitely an overwriter and not an underwriter. So I'm always searching for things that I can delete without really jeopardizing the flow of the story or the prose. But if that does happen, if I do find a sentence where I'm like, oh, this can be deleted and, it is not going to harm the flow of the story, it's not going to harm the plot or the dialogue or whatever, I will highlight that on my Kindle so I know that I can delete that once I look at this again on my Word document. So after that read-through is done, I will open my laptop again and I try as much as possible to give it a buffer between these two stages. So once I finish reading on my Kindle, I like to give it, this depends. I like to give it a couple of days if I'm allowed to, or a week if I can. Sometimes I don't have that time available if I need a quick turnaround, but at least a couple of hours, or just the morning after, I'll grab my Kindle, grab my laptop, and I'll go from page 1 again. All the typos I found on my Kindle, I will correct on my Word document. Any annotation, any little thing that I believe needs to be taken care of, I will do that now. I will make sure everything is clean, accept all track changes, and send that to my agent. This is pretty much it. This is how I edit my manuscripts. And I know that a lot of people have different ways of doing this, and I truly do not believe there is a correct way to do this. In my case, I consider myself a really fast writer and a really fast reader as well. But the problem with being fast is that I need more rounds of edits and I need, more read-throughs that maybe other people would. So my editing process needs to be tailored to that. It needs to make sure that, because I'm a fast drafter, I need to look at the same thing multiple times to catch the little things that don't really make sense and to make sure that everything flows nicely. And this editing style really works for me, and I really, really enjoy the process. That's pretty much it. I really hope this helped you editing your manuscripts or your scripts for YouTube videos, for instance, or even, your blog posts. I think basically anything can be done this way. Although, of course, that when we are talking about a huge manuscript, having the whole thing about reading it on Kindle or having a beat map for that makes more sense than if you were just writing a blog post. But all of these things that I talked about today can be definitely adapted to whatever you're writing. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Every writer has their own way of editing. There are endless routines and quirky processes out there. And this one isn't a rulebook by any means, but if you're curious about how some of the greats make magic on the page, I can't recommend Worldsmiths enough. It's a Nebula original by Tale Foundry, packed with insider lessons and peeks into the creative worlds of iconic writers. It's a goldmine for anyone looking to learn from the best. And you can watch Worldsmiths right now only on Nebula. Nebula is a streaming platform created by and for creators. It's packed with thought-provoking original content. And since it's creator-owned, you'll get exclusive ad-free videos from your favorite YouTubers, including me. Nebula offers several ways to join. Monthly subscriptions are $6, but the best plan of all is annual, where with my code you get 40% off, meaning you pay only $36 for the whole year. And that's basically $3 a month, which is less than a coffee. So if you're looking to support creators like me and explore amazing exclusive content, hit the link in the description box below and start streaming on Nebula today.